That Virginia teacher, police say, was shot by her 6-year-old student Friday is now in stable condition. It is unlikely the boy will be charged, but the mother could face charges. The boy taking the gun from home and then bringing it to school in his backpack before allegedly shooting his teacher during class. Now it's up to the Commonwealth's attorney in Virginia to decide whether any charges should be filed. Mark Levin is the Chief Policy Counsel of the Council on Crime and Justice. And Mark, thanks for being with us. You have dealt with issues of juvenile justice and specifically the minimum age of juvenile court jurisdiction. Let me ask the question bluntly. What should happen to this 6-year-old boy in a case like this, and why?
Well, we need more information, I think, and an assessment. But obviously, the police were right to take the child into custody to make sure no one would be further harmed. And certainly, the child's parent faces potentially being charged as a low-level misdemeanor in Virginia, but for failing to secure her gun as she's required to under, lock and key or some other mechanism, given that there's a child in the household.
You know, Mark, parents are now finding themselves caught in the crossfire. I want you to take a look at this parent who spoke to the media right after the shooting. Take a listen.
Let's do something. We've got a new governor now. Let's do something. Let's change it. You've got a beautiful country. You've got beautiful people. But what's the problem? Guns.
You see it on the news all the time when it happens in different areas, and you never think it's going to be you. I think today has been one of the most horrific calls that I've received.
Now, the question being asked is, if parents are being caught in the crossfire, is it time to hold parents accountable? Because, after all, some would argue, what good does it do to put a 6-year-old in prison? And the police chief in Newport News saying the boy's mother could face charges. What about the Michigan case where the parents of the alleged Oxford high school shooter have now been charged? Are we starting to see a sea change?
Well, there are, different cases in some ways, but you're right that there is certainly a similarity. And I also want to emphasize that even though I also think 6-year-olds cannot form the criminal intent necessary to be charged even in juvenile court, although Virginia does permit that, about half of states do not. But nonetheless, there are other remedies in terms of, child welfare services. If it was found that the parent intentionally contributed to this, for example, obviously the state could petition with the court to have the child removed and placed in another setting. And of course, there's social services. And so this is really similar to what you see, for example, with civilly committing someone who's severely mentally ill because they're in extreme danger to themselves or others. Obviously, like there, it's a high bar to remove a child from their parent, as it should be. But this is, just an egregious case to think that a 6-year-old would shoot a teacher like this. I think the public is rightfully appalled.
Mark, Virginia, though, is a very conservative case, conservative state. Do you see any charges coming about as a result of this? And if they do, will the charges be political or legal?
Well, I think on the legal front, the mother does certainly face, it's a low-level misdemeanor, but potentially a charge for failing to secure her gun. And, this is one of the things, regardless of, your views on other gun control or gun safety measures, however different people put it, it's pretty non-controversial that, these laws to require that guns be secured need to really be strengthened. And even the Virginia law, it only covers it if the victim potentially is under 14. It shouldn't matter who the victim is. That basically the issue is if you have a child in the household or even someone who's severely mentally ill, anyone who cannot be trusted to operate a gun, then it needs to be secured. As far as the other, of course, school security is a big issue. I'm talking to you from Texas and Uvalde, which was just a horrific incident here. It does emphasize the need that we have clear protocols in place for how to deal with an active shooter and make sure that ideally we wouldn't have this to begin with. And we need to do things like mentoring and early intervention to identify kids who pose a risk. But once an incident does happen, certainly unlike Uvalde, we saw here that the police were able to. Thankfully, this teacher, Zwiner, she's a hero. She looked out for her kids first. And then even when she woke up at the hospital, she asked about her kids. So I think not only do we have to recognize the importance of law enforcement, recognize the courage of this teacher.
Let's talk more more about the teacher. She made it from the classroom to the main office despite a bleeding chest wound. That's according to a grandparent who happened to be there, and then administered CPR. Here's how she described it. So we understand now the teacher is recovering, but it is still a shocking situation. Despite the prevalence of school shootings, have we now entered a new level of school violence? And how long before we hear people saying, arm the kids? Because the most recent wave of school shootings had people saying, arm the teachers.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't see that as kind of most people finding that to be the best approach. I think, certainly having fewer guns on premises like schools would be better, and those that do exist, ideally with law enforcement. I think that, you look at airports, for example, you don't see a lot of shootings in airports. People cannot bring guns through security. So that's a pretty effective mechanism. Now, so I think, and if you look at the United States writ large in comparison to other developed countries, we have far more homicides. They have a big problem with knife crime, for example, in London, and that's terrible. But with a gun, one is much more likely to actually be killed or have a paralyzing injury. It's very hard to fight back. And so Ms. Werner, she was originally in critical condition, and we're all just so thankful that she stabilized. But this is going to have a tremendous effect on her life and also scar emotionally the other kids for the rest of their lives.
Got to ask you this before you go. You're right. You're in Texas. You're in Austin, Uvalde. Twofold question. Did anything change the laws? And also, we just saw on Capitol Hill where they removed the metal detectors, and members of Congress now say that they feel that their lives are at risk. Is the nation moving one way or another, or are we at a stalemate?
Yeah, I think we're moving in different directions in different places. I know Illinois, for example, enacted an assault weapons ban today, but obviously here in Texas, for example, you no longer need a permit to have a concealed weapon or even open carry. So, there are a lot of schools of thought, but most people agree that we've got 400 or 450 million guns. We want to have those people who have those guns be responsible gun owners and keep guns out of the hands of people that are dangerous. That's a pretty common sense proposition. So, I think that when we look at the evidence, it does show that laws requiring guns be secured are quite effective in preventing both accidental and this type of, which apparently was not accidental. And then, some other proposals like gun buybacks do something to prevent suicide, but it's really not people that were planning to commit violent crimes who turn in their guns. So we can't really paint with a broad brush. We have to look at each proposal based on the evidence, I think.
Mark, I'd like to say we probably won't talk, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Mark Levin from Austin, Texas. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.